Do you believe in destiny not as a poetic metaphor or a philosophical abstraction, but as a force that silently shapes the fate of nations, leaders, and empires? Imagine for a moment that every dramatic turn in America's story, every rise and fall of its leaders, every shock that shakes its society to the core, was already written centuries ago, tucked away in cryptic verses by a man who lived long before the United States even existed. Imagine that the path the country walks today, the turmoil, the conflict, the hope, the resurgence, is nothing but the unfolding of a script penned by a prophet who saw the future as clearly as most people see the present. Nostradamus, Michel de Nostradamus, a man whose quatrains continue to haunt the corridors of power, even in a world ruled by satellites, supercomputers, and digital chaos. As the calendar turns to 2026, America finds itself confronting a storm of uncertainties. Political divisions have carved deep trenches through its society, technology has reshaped every corner of life, and global tensions hover like sparks waiting for an explosion. And yet, amid all of this, an old question resurfaces. Did Nostradamus foresee this? And if he did, what role does America play in his vision? Most importantly, how does Donald Trump, arguably one of the most polarizing figures in American history, fit into a prophecy written nearly 500 years ago? The deeper you dive into Nostradamus' quatrains, the more unsettling the parallels become. Many scholars argue that his references to the great empire of the West or the eagle nation beyond the sea point unmistakably to the United States. Others dismiss it as coincidence. But whether you believe it or not, the uncanny alignment of his words with modern events forces even the most skeptical minds to pause. The idea that the destiny of a superpower, its triumphs, its conflicts, even the rise of its leaders, might have been foreseen centuries ago is both terrifying and mesmerizing. America stands at a crossroads in 2026, a year charged with political heat, economic tremors, and global tension. The air crackles with anticipation. Millions of Americans feel a strange mixture of hope and dread. Events unfolding across the nation seem to echo something ancient, something foretold, and in conversations whispered between analysts, believers, and even world leaders, one name emerges again and again: Nostradamus. Some read his quatrains as warnings, others as encrypted maps of fate, but nearly everyone agrees. They deserve attention now more than ever. One of the most contentious prophecies often linked to the United States is Nostradamus' reference to the return of the old lion and the great leader cast out, rising again with the fury of the red nation divided. Interpretations vary, but many modern readers see it as a striking parallel to America's political upheaval involving Donald Trump. The idea of a leader returning after being cast aside, fueled by a divided nation consumed by anger, fear, and loyalty, eerily mirrors America's current reality. Whether viewed with admiration or alarm, Trump remains a force that has reshaped American politics to an extraordinary degree. His supporters believe he embodies the fight against corruption and global manipulation. His opponents see him as a destabilizing figure whose influence threatens the core of democracy. But both sides agree. He is a phenomenon like no other. Nostradamus' description of a leader whose words ignite the crowds, whose return splits the world in two, feels like an uncanny reflection of the atmosphere surrounding Trump in 2026. The rallies, the controversies, the investigations, the resurgence, all of it reads like a living prophecy. The United States, already fractured along political, cultural, and ideological lines, edges closer to a critical tipping point. Some fear chaos. Others believe rebirth is coming, and Nostradamus' verses seem to whisper that both may be true. The American people, too, play a central role in these interpretations. Nostradamus often spoke of the people of the great eagle who rise, rebel, collapse, and rise again. Many interpret this as America's cycle of reinvention, a nation built on resilience, forged through crisis, capable of extraordinary transformation. But the same quatrains also hint at danger, a warning that when the eagle nation becomes too divided, when its people turn against one another rather than their challenges, it becomes vulnerable to internal and external forces that seek to exploit its weakness. As 2026 unfolds, Americans find themselves trapped between two realities, one shaped by hope for renewal and the other by fear of collapse. Economic uncertainty grips the markets, with inflation waves and job disruptions fueled by automation and global instability. Social media amplifies every conflict, every rumor, every emotional spark, turning everyday disagreements into national battles.
Foreign adversaries monitor the situation closely, calculating opportunities. And through all of it, the ghostly shadow of Nostradamus's warnings hangs in the background. One quatrain describes the land of liberty set ablaze by its own children, the fire not from without, but from within. This line has been debated for decades, but in recent years many have drawn connections to America's internal struggles, civil unrest, ideological clashes, and the battle between traditional and progressive visions of the future. It is not war from another nation that threatens America most, but war among its own people. Nostradamus seemed to understand that empires rarely fall from external invasion. They collapse because they rot internally. History proves it again and again. But perhaps the most unsettling prophecy linked to America in 2026 is the one some interpreters believe hints at a monumental decision, one that could alter the course of the world. Nostradamus wrote, "Of the moment when the great nation chooses its fate, the stormbringer or the peace-bearer, the one cast out or the one reborn." These cryptic lines are often tied to American elections and political transitions. The idea that America's leadership in 2026 may have consequences far beyond its borders feels chillingly accurate. In a world dependent on American military strength, economic influence, and global leadership, even a small shift in American politics sends shockwaves across continents. Donald Trump's re-emergence in the political arena creates an atmosphere of unpredictability. His supporters see him as the only leader capable of restoring America's dominance, challenging global powers like China, and confronting corruption within the system. Nostradamus has references to the roaring voice of the Western lion, and the man whose fire makes the powerful tremble are often pointed to as symbolic parallels. Meanwhile, critics fear that his return could intensify America's divisions, escalate global conflicts, and push the country toward authoritarianism. The quatrain describing the eagle wounded yet rising again, its right wing torn but rebuilt stronger, has become a point of fascination among those who believe America is entering a period of profound transformation. Some interpret the torn right wing as political strife within America's conservative base. Others see it as a broader metaphor for national struggle. Either way, the prophecy's message is clear. America is wounded, but its future depends on how it responds to the wounds. Nostradamus also warned of a time when the great empire of liberty stands at the edge of the abyss, the world watching as the choice of its people becomes the fate of many nations. This prophecy resonates powerfully in 2026. As conflicts escalate abroad and alliances shift, America's leadership becomes more critical than ever. China's rise, Russia's aggression, Europe's fragmentation, all of these global dynamics place immense pressure on the United States to maintain stability. But inside America, unity is slipping through the cracks. The threat is not simply political chaos. It is the possibility that America's internal fractures could open the door to external manipulation. And yet, despite the fear, Nostradamus's prophecies also hint at hope. His writing style, cryptic, symbolic, layered, forces readers to consider multiple interpretations, but one theme remains constant. The future is shaped not just by leaders, but by the people who choose them. America's destiny in 2026 is not merely in the hands of Donald Trump or any political figure. It is in the hands of millions of Americans who stand at the threshold of history, carrying both the burden and the power to shape the world. As this chapter closes, the shadows of prophecy loom larger, the echoes of Nostradamus grow louder, and the stakes of America's choices become clearer. 2026 is not just another year, it is a year foretold, a year of reckoning, a year where destiny and decision collide. But what happens next, the rise, the fall, or the transformation, will be determined not only by what has been written, but by what America chooses to write anew.
As dawn rises over America in 2026, the air feels strangely electric, as if the nation itself is holding its breath. Streets fill, screens glow, voices clash, and yet beneath all of the noise lies an undercurrent of something ancient, an uneasiness that whispers through conversation and commentary alike. People argue about politics, economics, culture, identity, but underneath all of it there is a deeper fear that few openly acknowledge. The fear that the country is moving toward a moment that cannot be avoided, a moment foretold long before the United States existed. A moment Nostradamus hinted at in his cryptic verses. A moment Americans now find themselves living through. Across the nation, debates intensify about whether 2026 is merely another turbulent year or the year destiny reveals itself. People scroll through social media threads with trembling fingers, watch commentaries late into the night, and whisper theories behind closed doors. Nostradamus, prophecy, fate, leadership, collapse, renewal. The ancient and the modern collide in the American consciousness like never before. And at the center of every discussion stands a single figure, Donald Trump. The more time passes, the more Nostradamus quatrains seem to cast a strange, shimmering reflection onto modern America. Lines written centuries ago begin to resemble political headlines. Not perfectly, of course, not literally, but symbolically, eerily, dramatically. Nostradamus never named people outright. Instead, he spoke in symbols. The great Western lion returning, the leader cast from the seat who rises again, the nation divided under a red storm, the ruler whose voice shakes the world. Scholars argue, skeptics scoff, believers nod knowingly. But no matter the stance, the possibility is impossible to ignore. In the heart of this storm, Donald Trump's presence feels almost mythic. Loved deeply by some, reviled fiercely by others, he is not simply a politician. He is a catalyst, a force, a lightning bolt that exposes the fractures of a nation and amplifies its unresolved tensions. Whether people believe in prophecy or not, it is undeniable that Trump's re-emergence in 2026 feels like the next chapter of a story whose plot twists were predicted long ago. Nostradamus wrote of the old lion rising from exile, and the return that blinds the watchers in gold and fire. To many, these lines represent a leader who reclaims influence after being cast out, disrupting the expectations of the political elite. The parallels are striking, especially when one considers Trump's unexpected political comeback in 2026. After years of controversy, legal battles, and public division, his return carries an aura that feels less like a political campaign and more like a reckoning. Even people who disagree with him acknowledge one thing. His ability to command attention, loyalty, and passion is unparalleled. But Nostradamus' verses were never meant to comfort. Alongside the imagery of return and resurgence came warnings. Warnings that echo uneasily across the American landscape in 2026. One quatrain speaks of the great nation torn by its twin suns, a poetic description that many interpret as America's two political parties. The idea of a house divided is not new. It has existed since Lincoln's era. But in 2026, the divide is no longer ideological. It is existential. Families split. Communities break apart. Friendships dissolve. Even institutions tremble under the weight of conflicting visions for America's future. The rise of Trump intensifies this divide. His supporters see him as the last line of defense against globalist agendas, corruption, moral decay, and the erosion of American identity. They believe Nostradamus foresaw an era where the people would reject the manipulations of elites and reclaim the nation's destiny. They believe Trump's return is not merely political, it is prophetic. On the other side, his critics view Nostradamus' warnings differently. To them, the quatrains about the storm of the Western House, the eagle bleeding from within, and the fire of the leader's tongue sparking conflict on distant shores are ominous predictions of potential disaster. They fear that Trump's resurgence could trigger chaos, economic instability, foreign confrontation, even civil unrest. Every rally, every speech, every announcement becomes a point of tension, a possible spark. America in 2026 feels like a country walking along the edge of a blade. Every decision, every word, every news headline pushes it closer to one side or the other, order or chaos, renewal or collapse, unity or fragmentation. Nostradamus quatrains do not give clear answers. They only deepen the mystery. One of the most chilling lines associated with America reads, "The great eagle shall tremble under the shadow of the red conflict, its wings beaten by storms of its own making." Many believe this refers to internal conflict, not foreign war. The red conflict is interpreted by some as political upheaval, or, in modern terms, the tension surrounding the conservative movement and Trump's influence. Interpreters note that Nostradamus often used red to symbolically describe fire, passion, blood, or civil strife. In 2026, America sees all four. Everywhere you go, New York, Florida, Texas, California, political conversations feel like emotional minefields. A simple opinion can ignite an argument. A single social media post can spark a storm. People no longer disagree. They struggle to coexist. Nostradamus seemed to anticipate this when he wrote of the people torn, each convinced of divine righteousness. It is a chilling observation, one that describes America in 2026 with near-perfect accuracy. But beyond politics, Nostradamus' prophecies tied to this year speak of global shifts that place immense pressure on America and its leadership. The rise of China looms large. Europe faces instability. Conflicts simmer in regions that could erupt at any moment. Economic systems tremble under inflation, debt, and technological disruption. The world is changing faster than any government can manage, and America, as the global superpower, is forced to adapt or risk losing its dominant role. In one of his quatrains, Nostradamus wrote, "The great empire of liberty shall face its trial by fire when the dragon ascends unchallenged, and the bear awakens with wounded pride." Many interpret the dragon as China and the bear as Russia. Both nations play critical roles in shaping 2026. China's economic and military rise challenges American supremacy. Russia's conflicts create global instability that tests America's alliances. Trump, known for his unpredictable foreign policy style, becomes a focal point of speculation. Supporters believe his firm stance could restore global respect. Critics fear it could ignite conflict. Nostradamus' imagery of the eagle screaming amidst the clash of dragon and bear suggests a moment when America must choose between confrontation and compromise, between defense and diplomacy. The decision could shape the world for generations. And while the prophecy offers no clear direction, it underscores the gravity of America's position in 2026. But perhaps the most unsettling prophecy linked to this year is one many call the shadowed election. Nostradamus described a moment when the leader chosen shall face rejection and ascend again through the fury of the people. Some interpret this as a return of a leader previously defeated. Others see it as a leader whose legitimacy is questioned. In the context of Trump, the quatrain resonates powerfully. His return is not smooth. It is turbulent, defiant, fueled by unprecedented passion and equally unprecedented resistance. The American people, those at the heart of this prophetic drama, carry an enormous burden in 2026. Nostradamus often wrote of the crowd that becomes a tide, the citizens who hold the fate of empires, and the cry of the people shaping the destiny of kings. These lines highlight a truth that transcends prophecy. Leaders rise and fall based on the will of the people. Whether driven by fear, hope, anger, or faith, Americans become the architects of the year that Nostradamus foresaw. In homes across the nation, parents talk anxiously about the future. In cafes, college students debate destiny versus free will. In boardrooms, executives analyze political risks and economic threats. In churches and community centers, people pray for guidance. Nostradamus' name appears on talk shows, podcasts, online forums, and academic debates. Some believe his predictions are unfolding. Others dismiss them as coincidence. But regardless of belief, the curiosity is undeniable. Everyone wants to know what happens next. Trump's role in this unfolding story intensifies as 2026 progresses. Nostradamus' verses about the voice that stirs the sleeping nation and the man whose words divide yet awaken carry a haunting familiarity. Trump's speeches are fiery, unapologetic, energizing. His critics see them as dangerous. His supporters see them as the truth. Nostradamus described such a leader as the firebrand whose presence bends destiny, raising the question, is Trump shaping America's fate, or is he merely fulfilling what was already written? The quatrain about the lightning king returning after thunder shakes the palace is often cited by those who believe Nostradamus foresaw Trump's political resurgence. The palace is interpreted by some as the White House. The thunder represents upheaval, scandal, or disruption, and the lightning king symbolizes a powerful figure whose return shocks the establishment. But prophecy is not destiny, at least not in the literal sense. Nostradamus never guaranteed outcomes. He offered warnings, possibilities, potentials. His verses serve as mirrors reflecting the choices of nations. And America, standing on the threshold of 2026, faces choices that could redefine its identity. Will the nation unite or fracture further? Will its leadership stabilize or combust? Will Donald Trump's influence restore or destabilize the country? Will the American people overcome division or drown in it? Each question feels like a thread in a tapestry woven long ago, yet still being embroidered by the hands of millions of citizens. As the year advances, the sense of prophecy only grows stronger. Global markets tremble, tensions rise, voices grow louder, and in the quiet moments, late at night, early in the dawn, when the chaos of the day fades, many Americans find themselves staring into the unknown, wondering whether Nostradamus' visions are coming to life before their eyes. One prophecy lingers more than any other. The empire of the West shall rise renewed only after walking through the valley of shadows. America in 2026 is walking through that valley. Dark, uncertain, unpredictable. But the path does not end in darkness. Whether renewal or ruin awaits depends not on Nostradamus, not on Trump, not even on fate, but on the choices the nation makes now. America enters the deeper stretch of 2026 with an energy that feels both electrifying and unsettling, as if the entire nation is suspended between two realities, one it understands, and one it senses but cannot fully grasp. The news cycles spin faster than ever, each headline more intense than the last, each political development more dramatic, each public reaction more emotional. It is a year drenched in uncertainty, where every event feels like a sign, every shift feels like a turning point, and every rumor spreads like wildfire. People cling to answers, theories, interpretations, anything that gives structure to the chaos. And in the middle of this frantic search for meaning, Nostradamus' centuries-old quatrains glow like embers in the dark, casting shadows that resemble the present in ways too sharp to ignore. Across living rooms, classrooms, churches, bars, and digital platforms, the conversation intensifies. Did Nostradamus truly foresee the turmoil gripping America? Did he predict the rise, fall, and return of political giants? Did he warn of a nation torn between loyalty and fear, hope and despair, tradition and transformation? If his prophecies hold truth, then 2026 may not be an ordinary year. It may be the fulcrum on which America's fate pivots. People who once brushed off prophecies as superstition now revisit his words with trembling curiosity. They search for clues linking the past to the present. They analyze each metaphor. They compare events to quatrains that speak of the empire of the West, the divided republic, the lion returning, and the people rising in thunder. They wonder whether these are coincidences or pre-written echoes of a destiny unfolding in real time. The most discussed of these prophecies is the one involving a leader who returns from political death, carried by the fury of a divided people. Interpretations vary, but the common thread is impossible to miss. Nostradamus often used the imagery of rebirth, resurgence, and unexpected comebacks to describe moments of high political drama. In 2026 America, the idea fits like a glove. Donald Trump's re-entry into American political life is not quiet, gentle, or predictable. It is explosive. Every rally he holds becomes a spectacle of emotion. Cheers, chants, anger, determination, fear, hope, resentment, all swirling together in a storm that feels almost supernatural. His supporters view him not as a politician, but as a symbol, a warrior against corruption, a defender of America's past and future, a voice that echoes their frustrations, a figure whom they believe Nostradamus himself may have glimpsed across the centuries. Critics, however, see the opposite. For them, Trump's return is a warning sign, a tremor before an earthquake. They believe Nostradamus' references to the voice that inflames the crowd, the leader who divides the kingdom, and the spark that sets the Western Empire ablaze point not to triumph, but to the potential for chaos. In their eyes, Trump's presence deepens division, threatens stability, and brings America closer to internal conflict than it has been in decades. And indeed, America in 2026 is a nation at war with itself, not through armies and weapons, but through ideology, identity, and perception. It is a war fought in conversations, on social platforms, in votes, in courts, in the privacy of homes where families avoid discussing politics for fear of confrontation. Nostradamus wrote of the great nation whose war is not with a foreign foe, but with its own reflection. A haunting description that mirrors America's current reality. Economic uncertainty intensifies this internal tension. Inflation fluctuates wildly. Job markets shift under the weight of AI automation. Small businesses struggle. Large corporations tighten their grip on industries. People worry about their savings, their homes, their futures. Nostradamus' warning about the people burdened by the gold that loses value resurfaces in countless discussions about market instability. No matter where Americans stand politically, they share a common fear, that the systems built to protect them are crumbling beneath their feet. Foreign threats add another layer of complexity. Tensions with China escalate unpredictably. Russia continues to disrupt global stability. The Middle East experiences flare-ups that threaten to pull larger nations into conflict. Nostradamus' imagery of the dragon rising boldly and the bear enraged by its wounds feels disturbingly relevant. America's position as a superpower becomes both a responsibility and a vulnerability. Allies look to the United States for guidance, but America's internal chaos weakens its ability to lead with clarity. Trump's approach to this global landscape becomes a focal point of speculation. Supporters argue that his assertive, unpredictable style is exactly what America needs to confront global adversaries. They believe he embodies strength, independence, and a willingness to challenge powerful nations that threaten American interests. They point to Nostradamus' quatrain about the Western lion whose roar shakes the distant empires, convinced that these words describe Trump's impact on the world stage. Opponents counter with a different interpretation. They see the quatrains referencing reckless fire, words that provoke kings, and alliances shattered by ego as warnings against Trump's influence on foreign policy. They fear that his decisions could spark international conflict or destabilize fragile regions. For them, Nostradamus is not predicting Trump's success, but cautioning against the consequences of his return. Through all of this, the American people find themselves not merely observers but participants in a narrative that feels both urgent and surreal. Each individual becomes part of a collective force that determines the nation's direction. Nostradamus often emphasized the power of the people in shaping the outcomes of his prophecies. The nation's fate rests not with the crown but with the crowd, he wrote in one of his lesser-known interpretations. In 2026, that message resonates with extraordinary intensity. Everywhere you look, the contrast between belief and disbelief creates a strange harmony. Some Americans laugh at the very idea of prophecy, brushing it aside as fiction. Others treat Nostradamus' quatrains like sacred scripture. Most land somewhere in between, skeptical but curious enough to wonder. And beneath that curiosity lies a shared anxiety. What does the future hold? Amid rising political storm clouds, Nostradamus' prophecy about the dark winter of the Eagle Nation captures the country's attention. Some interpret dark winter as economic hardship. Others see it as social fragmentation. A few see it as literal conflict. But one thing is clear: the metaphor strikes a nerve. America is experiencing a metaphorical winter, a season of cold judgment, frozen alliances, and storms that test its strength. Yet even within these grim predictions, Nostradamus hinted at renewal. "The eagle shall rise again when the storm passes," he wrote, describing a rebirth that follows turmoil. Many Americans cling to this possibility. They believe that the chaos of 2026, painful as it is, may usher in a new era of unity, purpose, and strength. Trump's supporters see him as the catalyst of this rebirth. His critics believe renewal will emerge only after the storm he represents fades. Each side sees itself as the guardian of America's future. The media, ever hungry for drama, amplifies these tensions. Every prophecy connected to Trump, America, or 2026 becomes a talking point. Some outlets sensationalize Nostradamus' predictions, portraying him as a mystic who saw every headline coming. Others mock the entire idea. But regardless of how it is portrayed, the fascination refuses to die. In times of uncertainty, people search for patterns. And Nostradamus offers the ultimate pattern, one that promises meaning, even if that meaning is ambiguous. But beyond politics and prophecy, something deeper stirs within the American psyche. A feeling that the country is undergoing a spiritual confrontation. A struggle between fear and courage, division and unity, chaos and clarity. Nostradamus often wrote of the soul of the empire being tested, a poetic phrase that captures the emotional and psychological climate of America in 2026. It is a year of tests of faith, resilience, identity, and conviction. Donald Trump, willingly or unwillingly, becomes the epicenter of these tests. His presence forces people to reveal what they value, what they fear, what they believe America should be. Some see him as the embodiment of strength. Others see him as the embodiment of danger. But no one sees him as insignificant. His influence radiates through every conversation, every headline, every decision made by politicians and citizens alike. As months pass, Nostradamus' prophecies continue to echo through American society. The quatrains about division, resurgence, global conflict, and renewal swirl through discussions like ghosts whispering in crowded rooms. People analyze them, argue about them, reinterpret them. But beneath the debate lies a truth. Prophecies gain power not merely from what they predict, but from how people respond to them. And America, in 2026, is responding with intensity. Fear, hope, anger, curiosity, belief, disbelief, all blending into a national identity in flux. The year marches on, turbulent and unpredictable, as if the nation is walking through the very prophecies it debates. Storms gather on the horizon. Sharp choices loom ahead. And though the future remains uncertain, one thing grows increasingly clear. 2026 is a year in which America confronts not only political turmoil, but the profound question of whether destiny is written or rewritten by the hands of its people. By the time America reaches the midpoint of 2026, a strange heaviness fills the national atmosphere, an emotional pressure that no scientific instrument can measure, yet every individual feels. It settles into conversations, shapes the tone of news broadcasts, lingers in the words of analysts, and hides behind the eyes of people walking down city streets. It is the sense that something enormous is unfolding, something bigger than politics or economics, something that transcends individual leaders or parties. It feels like history tightening its grip on the nation, like destiny edging closer, like the invisible gears of prophecy beginning to move. Across the country, Americans grapple with an unspoken truth. The divisions tearing the nation apart are not temporary misunderstandings or minor ideological disagreements. They are deep, structural, emotional, spiritual fractures. Families sit at dinner tables, carefully avoiding topics that were once harmless. Coworkers whisper their political thoughts only when certain the wrong ears are not listening. Social gatherings fracture into factions based on belief, loyalty, identity. Nostradamus' quatrain about the empire torn by its own sons, where brothers look upon brothers as enemies, emerges repeatedly in discussions, not as metaphor but as reflection. America has become a nation where people live in parallel realities. One group sees 2026 as the beginning of an American reawakening, a return to strength, patriotism, independence, and clarity, believing Trump is the catalyst for this rebirth. To them, he is the leader Nostradamus described as the lion whose second rise shakes the foundations of the old order. Another group believes 2026 represents the slow erosion of democratic norms, the rise of extremism, the unraveling of civil stability. To them, Nostradamus' warnings about the firebrand king, the one who divides the land of liberty, and the great turbulence of the Eagle Nation feel like grim forecasts of their fears. Between these perspectives lies a third group, millions of Americans exhausted by conflict, desperate for calm, yearning for unity but unable to imagine how it can be achieved. They read Nostradamus' verses not for validation, but for comfort. They search for a hint of hope in his words, a suggestion that chaos will give way to peace, that division will give way to healing. They cling to his prophecy that the empire will emerge renewed after the long winter, even though the winter still feels endless. But prophecy, as Nostradamus intended it, is not a roadmap. It is a mirror. And in 2026, America stares into that mirror, seeing both its greatest strengths and its deepest weaknesses reflected back. The world watches as the nation, once seen as the symbol of stability, becomes the center of uncertainty. Foreign governments analyze every shift in American politics with nervous anticipation. Financial markets tremble at the slightest sign of instability. Allies speak in cautious tones, unsure how much longer the United States can anchor the global order. Nostradamus wrote of a time when the Western Empire shall stand at the precipice, with the ancient powers of the East rising like twin shadows behind it. In 2026, this is not prophecy. It is reality. China's economic influence grows at an alarming rate. Russia, weakened yet defiant, clings to aggression as a tool of relevance. The Middle East becomes a chessboard of alliances and conflicts. Europe struggles with internal fractures. And through it all, America stands like a giant with wounded legs. Still powerful, still capable, but unsteady. The political landscape at home intensifies this vulnerability. Trump's presence commands devotion and outrage with equal force. Supporters see him as the only leader capable of confronting China, negotiating from strength, and restoring America's presence on the world stage. They believe that Nostradamus' reference to the Western lion who defies the dragon is a direct reflection of Trump's defiant approach toward China. They argue that his policies protect American jobs, sovereignty, and economic security in a rapidly changing global environment. Critics, however, see danger in this symbolism. They interpret the quatrain about the lion whose roar provokes the storms of the East as a warning that aggressive posturing could lead to catastrophic conflict. They fear that Trump's boldness may escalate tensions that fragile diplomacy currently contains. They worry that Nostradamus' vision of the great empire trembling under the threat of faraway kings could come to life. In Washington, the halls of power vibrate with uncertainty. Politicians plot, strategize, maneuver behind closed doors. Every decision becomes amplified, dissected, weaponized. Nostradamus' prophecy about the corrupted council of the Western House is brought up by critics who believe political institutions have become compromised. Supporters of Trump counter with Nostradamus' warning of the hidden elite guiding the empire to ruin, insisting that Trump is the only figure willing to confront entrenched powers. The judicial system faces unprecedented pressure as cases involving Trump, elections, and political rivals intertwine with the fabric of national identity. Nostradamus' quatrain about the great ordeal of the judge in the shadow of the lion reappears across media and analysis. People interpret it in ways that suit their worldview, but the essence remains the same. The nation's legal and political battles are no longer separate. They have fused into a single conflict over the soul of America. And yet, as intense as the political battle becomes, something even more profound stirs beneath the surface: a spiritual crisis. Nostradamus hinted at this when he wrote of the age when the people of the eagle lose their guiding flame. It is a line that resonates deeply in 2026, because America is not just experiencing political division. It is experiencing a crisis of identity. People no longer agree on what America stands for, what values define it, what future it should pursue. The anchor that once held the nation steady has loosened, leaving millions adrift in uncertainty. In this void, conspiracy theories flourish. Belief systems fragment. Mistrust spreads like a virus, infiltrating every level of society. Some Americans believe Nostradamus foresaw this chaos, that he predicted a time when truth becomes fog and the people wander in confusion. Others reject prophecy altogether, insisting the real problem is human failure, not destiny. But even among skeptics, there is an unspoken awareness that something unprecedented is unfolding. Meanwhile, the economy teeters between resilience and collapse. Job markets fluctuate unpredictably as automation accelerates. Housing prices soar in some regions and plummet in others. Corporations tighten their grip on industries while small businesses struggle to survive. Nostradamus' prophecy about the people burdened by the hollow value of gold becomes a symbol of economic anxiety. Inflation becomes a repeating nightmare. Financial inequality deepens. For many Americans, survival becomes the primary goal, overshadowing political ideology or prophetic intrigue. Yet even in this climate of fear and uncertainty, hope persists. Nostradamus spoke not only of destruction but renewal. The empire shall blaze, but from its embers shall rise the new eagle, he wrote in one of his most debated quatrains. Many interpret this as a promise that America's future, though threatened, is not doomed. The old systems may crumble, but a new era may follow, more unified, more resilient, more in tune with the world's changing dynamics. Some see Trump as the fire needed to burn away corruption and stagnation. Others believe renewal will come after his influence fades. Each interpretation reflects not prophecy, but perspective. Nostradamus becomes a vessel into which Americans pour their hopes, fears, and beliefs. As the year progresses, rallies grow larger. Protests grow louder. Media coverage becomes more chaotic. America becomes a storm, powerful, unpredictable, awe-inspiring, and dangerous. Nostradamus' prophecy about the year when the eagle flies through lightning becomes a metaphor repeated again and again. Lightning symbolizes conflict. Flight symbolizes resilience. America is doing both. The world watches closely, sensing that whatever happens in the United States will not remain within its borders. Global markets, foreign alliances, diplomatic strategies, all depend on America's stability. Nostradamus' imagery of the world trembling as the Western Empire decides its fate becomes increasingly relevant. But America's fate is not sealed. Prophecy is not command. As turbulent as 2026 becomes, the future remains open to the choices of millions. Nostradamus described a moment when the people awaken and steer the empire toward the dawn. Whether that dawn shines or burns depends on what Americans do next. The storm has not yet reached its peak. The prophecies have not yet played out. The choices have not yet been made. As the second half of 2026 looms, America stands on the threshold of something vast. A transformation that could elevate or destroy, unify or shatter. Fate whispers through the nation. Destiny pulses beneath the surface. And the shadow of Nostradamus stretches further with every passing day. By the late summer of 2026, America feels like a country living inside a pressure chamber. Every day carries a sense of suspense, as if the nation is collectively bracing for something but cannot name what that something is. Streets appear normal on the surface. People rushing to work, buses growling through intersections, cafes buzzing with conversation. But under that normalcy runs a quiet vibration, the electricity before a storm. Even the weather seems symbolic, cycling rapidly between oppressive heat, violent storms, and eerily still evenings. Nostradamus quatrains about the season when nature mirrors the turmoil of man begin to circulate widely, passed from phone to phone, from broadcast to broadcast. It is as though the sky itself is participating in the unfolding prophecy. Across the nation, people feel the tension rising. Politicians talk about unity while sowing division. Analysts speak about stability while describing chaos. Citizens cling to hope while drowning in fear. And every conversation eventually circles back to the same three forces: America itself, Donald Trump, and the ancient voice of Nostradamus whispering from centuries past. What was once folklore is now the framework through which millions interpret the turbulent reality of 2026. Trump's presence in the national narrative becomes larger, sharper, and more unpredictable. His rallies swell to sizes unseen since his earlier political rise, not merely gatherings but spectacles of emotion. His voice cuts through the noise of the times with a force that feels almost destined. Supporters treat him as the embodiment of patriotism, the warrior foretold by Nostradamus as the Lion of the West who returns when the empire falters. They chant his name with fervor, convinced that his leadership is the final line of defense against global threats and internal decay. His critics see the exact opposite. To them, Trump is the figure Nostradamus described as the fire that burns the house from within, a leader whose charisma inflames rather than calms, whose presence deepens divides rather than healing them. They watch his resurgence with dread, fearing that the nation is inching toward something dark: political collapse, civic unrest, or even the faint but terrifying possibility of civil conflict. They cite the quatrain speaking of the great republic trembling under the weight of its divisions, as a warning America has ignored for too long. Within homes, arguments that once erupted out loud now simmer quietly. People have become cautious with their opinions, selective with their words, measured in their interactions. It is no longer about disagreement, it is about survival within a fractured society. Nostradamus' prophecy about the empire where silence replaces dialogue seems to come to life as Americans suppress their thoughts for fear of judgment, social backlash, or conflict. Even close friendships feel delicate, fragile like thin glass that could shatter with the wrong word. Meanwhile, foreign governments study America's internal fire with both fascination and strategic calculation. China monitors every political shift, sensing opportunities to expand its influence. Russia watches for weaknesses. Countries in Europe worry openly about America's reliability as an ally. Global markets react violently to speeches, polls, scandals, and protests. Nostradamus' quatrain about the world trembling as the eagle loses its balance becomes a recurring point in international commentary. The world depends on America's stability, yet America is far from stable. Inside the country, institutions wrestle with unprecedented pressure. Courts face cases that challenge not only laws but the country's foundational principles. Congress becomes a battleground of ideological warfare, where compromise dies before it is even considered. Government agencies clash internally, their loyalties pulled in conflicting directions. Nostradamus seemed to foresee this when he wrote of the council that fractures, the advisors who turn upon each other, the chamber that once held order collapsing into discord. But Trump supporters argue that these institutions were broken long before he returned. They claim he is simply revealing what was hidden: corruption, complacency, global manipulation, the erosion of American values. They see him as the only leader strong enough to confront these forces. They quote Nostradamus' lines about the man of gold hair whose return sparks a popular uprising, interpreting gold hair as a symbolic reference to Trump. Whether literal or metaphorical, the imagery fuels their belief that prophecy supports his resurgence. Opponents counter with a different interpretation. They see Trump as the catalyst of instability, not the cure. They point to Nostradamus' warnings about the deceiving flame that blinds the faithful, and the leader whose return brings storm rather than sun. They argue that America needs healing, not conflict, calm, not fire, unity, not division. But it becomes increasingly clear that neither side is willing to concede ground. The emotional chasm between them widens daily. Economically, the nation enters a volatile stage. Inflation swings unpredictably, job markets fluctuate, industries transform rapidly under the weight of AI automation. Workers fear replacement by machines. Small businesses collapse or fight for survival. Wealth inequality reaches staggering heights. People begin citing Nostradamus' prophecy of the nation where the rich soar above the clouds while the poor sink beneath the flood. Many see this as the perfect description of the widening American wealth gap in 2026. As anxiety grows, desperation follows. Americans turn to everything: religion, activism, conspiracy theories, online movements, and ancient prophecies for answers. Nostradamus quatrains suddenly appear everywhere. On social platforms, in debates, in documentaries, even in everyday conversation. People cling to them not because they are certain of their meaning, but because they crave meaning in a time that feels meaningless. Trump himself becomes almost entwined with the prophecy. His speeches frequently reference destiny, rebirth, and the fight for America's future. To supporters, he sounds like the hero of Nostradamus' visions, a leader placed in the timeline deliberately, part of a cosmic design. To critics, he sounds like the fulfillment of Nostradamus' warnings, an omen, not a savior. And yet, beneath the chaos lies a quieter, deeper truth. America is not simply divided politically. It is divided spiritually. The core question of 2026 becomes not who will lead, but what does America want to become? Nostradamus wrote of the empire that must choose between the shadow and the dawn. That choice is now at the heart of every argument, every protest, every headline. Should America double down on its past or redefine its future? Should it reject globalism or embrace it? Should it prioritize tradition or evolution? Should it follow Trump's hard-charged path or seek something entirely different? The nation cannot decide, and that indecision becomes a heavy weight pressing on everyone. Meanwhile, global tensions creep toward dangerous thresholds. China's military expansion accelerates. Russia grows more unpredictable. Smaller nations form new alliances. The world seems to be rearranging itself, preparing for a new order. Nostradamus' quatrain about the great shift of powers, when East challenges West and West falters in confusion, takes on new life in foreign policy circles. America's internal struggles weaken its global influence, and adversaries begin testing boundaries. Trump supporters believe this is exactly why he must lead, that only he can stand against these rising threats. His critics argue the opposite, that his presence heightens global risk. But regardless of perspective, everyone agrees on one point. The world is entering a dangerous era where even small sparks could ignite major conflicts. And then there is the emotional exhaustion. Millions of Americans feel drained, weary from the relentless storm of political battles, economic worries, social tension, and global upheaval. Nostradamus' phrase, the tired legion of the eagle nation, feels painfully accurate. People crave normalcy, peace, predictability, even if only for a moment. But 2026 offers none. Instead, it demands decisions. It forces truth to the surface. It exposes illusions. It shatters complacency. Nostradamus warned that the era of the eagle would face a trial unlike any before. A trial that tests not the nation's power, but its character. In the final months of the year, ominous signs intensify. Protests swell larger. Political rhetoric grows sharper. International tensions escalate. Economic indicators flash warnings. The nation feels as though it is approaching an invisible cliff, a precipice from which it might either leap upward into renewal or plunge downward into chaos. And through it all, Americans continue searching Nostradamus quatrains for clarity, not because they trust prophecy more than reality, but because reality has become impossible to interpret. They search for a path, a pattern, a sign, something that tells them which direction the future leans. But prophecy does not guide. It only reflects. Nostradamus offers possibilities, not answers. And the greatest possibility is this: America's future in 2026 is not predetermined. It is unfolding in every choice, every voice, Every belief, every division, every moment of unity that still flickers in the darkness. The storm continues to gather. The nation continues to tremble. And destiny, whatever form it takes, moves closer with each passing day.